So, of course, sensory science is as much a social science as it is a hard science. No? Um, our social conditioning could affect how we perceive food as consumers, for example. And in sensory evaluation, we also do focus group discussions, for example, wherein we um, talk face to face with all the persons. So we're not using booths, but rather something like a round table. And then we discuss certain product attributes. They use this for marketing or coming up with new products. And we'll discuss this in the latter part of the SEM. And of course, when you put together people with different social and cultural backgrounds, the dynamics of each focus group discussion would differ. Of course, in terms of serving samples, people would also have different beliefs. So you might want to at least inform the consumers for consumer testing what the samples will be, because if they're vegan and you're present or they're animal rights activists and you're presenting balut, or they happen to come from religions with dietary restrictions such as certain Adventists, Muslims, and maybe those religions who don't eat blood. Okay, so you want to consider those things as well. And you want to maybe ask, sometimes in the demographic, it's relevant to ask certain social information like their income bracket or their geographical origins or perhaps their religion, because that may um, help us in correlating our sensory test results. So in sensory evaluation, again, there are certain group activities like focus group discussions or in descriptive sensory test wherein interpersonal interactions will be inevitable. And there are some people who are very opinionated, and if the if the moderator is not able to rein in that panelist, then that panelist may dominate the discussion. On the other hand, people who are maybe shy of telling their opinions for any reason may be afraid to speak up even if they have something valuable to say. Okay, so again, in this case, the panel leader or moderator should be doing the proper reining in or probing, such that all types of personalities can speak freely and can freely express what they need to say, especially if it would benefit the study. So not all persons come with proper motivation. Okay, when you have different types of individuals, so some of them are volunteers and therefore they may come there dragging their feet just because you're their friend and you want to help your friend, but you're not really in the mood to taste food, or it's a food that you're not really interested in. If you're employed, for example, if it's an analytical sensory test and you have long-term employment for that one, sorry. Um, of course, at times even the sample would determine your motivation. If there's something happening that day that would make you lack interest, then maybe you won't assess the sample as rigorously as you would have done. This is especially dangerous, for example, if you're in the quality control area and um, you weren't motivated enough to try your best to see if there was a difference in the samples when in fact there was. And that difference in the samples would later prove out to be, let's say, fatal or damaging to the industry. On the other hand, as a panelist, as the analyst or the panel leader or the moderator, you must also be able to keep the motivations of the persons up. Okay, and other than moderating, another way to do this is by having the proper incentive. Again, just enough to motivate them, but not enough to affect their decision making regarding the objectivity rather of their decision making regarding the sensory test. Lastly, in the realm of psychology, there has been enough evidence to say that mood really does affect your decision making. It causes road rage in drivers, and it might cause adverse effects in assessing a certain food, whether it be a consumer or a trained panelist. Of course, for trained panelists, you're trained to set aside your moods as well as part of your training. So when you enter the room as a panelist in training, you must bear in mind that whatever happened to you that day or whatever you're thinking about should be set aside, and that you're supposed to focus on the task at hand for the time being. Of course, that's hard for others to do, but it's necessary because otherwise the panel performance would be affected. A single outlier, as we know it, could change the measures of central tendency of a group of data, and that's why we don't want that to happen as much as possible. And we could even go as far as discouraging panelists who cannot control their mood for that day, for example, from participating.